Welcome to another ACM Hangout session hosted by Arts Council Malta. Today we are going to be discussing the latest developments in technology and relationship with the arts sector, and we are going to be focusing specifically on NFTs. Here is some more information about that. In today's session, we are discussing the latest developments in the digital art sphere, with a particular focus on NFTs, which have sparked a number of debates in the artistic scene, and not just. Certainly, NFTs present an opportunity for new channels of selling, buying, and experiencing the arts. Much of the market for NFTs at the moment is in fact centered around collectibles. However, NFTs remain fairly new to the scene, and there are still a number of issues to be explored and addressed. Joining us today on this panel for this session are Professor Alexei Dingley, Professor of Artificial Intelligence within the Faculty of ICT at the University of Malta, welcome, and Dr. Sandro De Bono, Museum Thinker and Culture Strategist. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you.
So there is certainly a lot to say about the subject, and we are quite aware that we will not be covering all aspects, all art forms that are directly affected by this. However, we will start exploring the subject and understanding a little bit better the latest changes in technology and the relatively new phenomenon of NFTs. So, Alexei, technology, as we all know, is constantly changing, is constantly upgrading. So from a technology perspective, what are the latest trends which are directly impacting the world of arts?
I think the latest trends are various, and it really depends on the creativity of the artist. I think technology is an enabler, so it allows the artist to go way beyond what they have in mind. And I believe that since at the moment there's this big bandwagon on AI, I think a lot of artists will try to jump on that bandwagon, even because AI is becoming much more accessible. So, before it was only within the remit of scientists, and now it's being democratized. There are loads of tools that are available, and you don't need to be an AI expert to use these tools. So I envisage that they will start using them pretty much. When it comes to physical installations, we can't deny, of course, things like IoTs, the Internet of Things, whereby you can have anything practically connected to the internet. And the nice thing about that is that then you can plug it into an AI system, which then controls that installation. So, it's not just about the artist creating an artifact or an object, but it's about actually the artist now giving life to that artifact and object, and that's the most exciting part of it. If we look a little bit more further in the future, I envisage that the trend will move more towards VR and augmented reality, so virtual reality and augmented reality, in particularly because of the new developments coming up with the metaverse. So I believe that our reality will stop being either virtual or physical, but it will become mixed reality.
So there's a blurred line kind
exactly,
of between the two.
Exactly. So I think the distinction will finish eventually, and we'll be living in both worlds, either as physical people or maybe as virtual representations of ourselves. But that is, in my opinion, the most exciting development that will happen in the coming years.
And how about NFTs? So we have heard about this phenomenon, but perhaps we can have a brief description of what these are and how they are being actually applied, used.
Yeah, so NFTs are non-fungible tokens. They're being used a lot by artists of all sorts. I think they're very much versatile because practically all you need is a link to the piece of work, irrespective of whether it is a painting or a piece of music, or maybe even an animation or a combination of different medias as well. And then the interesting part about it is that it uses blockchain. So it's this digital ledger where you can actually post a transaction over there and claim the ownership of these NFTs. So it's not just a matter of creating something and releasing it. And as we know, with digital, anybody can copy everything, but you are actually claiming that that piece of work actually belongs to you.
But if we had perhaps to explore this in some more detail, what are NFTs in reality? How would you describe them? Like, how does the technology behind them work?
Okay, so NFTs essentially, when you have this digital artifact, it's a link to this digital artifact. So a link is like an address. We're used to links online. So you have this address to this digital artifact, and then it is registered on the blockchain. Now the blockchain is a block of information which is chained together. That's why we call it a blockchain. And essentially, it has a number of properties. So, you know, it's immutable. So if I register something, you can't come after me and say, no, that belongs to me. But it still has my ownership, and it gives me the permanence. So, you know, my mind is at rest that that record is over there, and the object, the virtual object, now belongs to me.
Okay. And Sandra, in terms of their applicability and also the opportunities that it is offering to the arts world, I mean, how are NFTs being applied? I know this is a bit of a broad question, but perhaps we can start from there and then.
Absolutely, yes. It is a broad question indeed. I think that NFTs have gained practically international acclaim, or have become very much or better known or exceptionally known over the past year and a half. And I think COVID has to do with that. I think that the way technology has evolved also has to do with that. In a way, NFTs have validated the possibilities that blockchain can provide from an artistic perspective. And I think what really made the difference to the sector, I'm talking of the international sector here, what really made the difference is that digital artists on the periphery who would have struggled to get feedback and to get endorsed by an art gallery suddenly had the possibility of having their works minted as NFTs. I'm using the vocabulary here, minted as NFTs, which means that thanks to NFTs, which is essentially a process, these works could become traceable. So before NFTs, any digital artwork or media would have been very difficult to trace. With NFTs, suddenly there is the possibility of traceability, which means that these assets could be also monetized, and there could be also a gain in terms of money, even when it comes to royalties. So when a work is transferred from one owner to the other, royalties are paid automatically. So the potential that NFTs give to the sector are something which are obviously very much welcome. There's a lot of experimentation going on. I think that the biggest challenge for NFTs is to understand them beyond the physical asset, because more often than not we understand the artwork as a tangible thing. Museums have been experimenting a lot. For example, Uffizi have been minting digital twins of works of art in their collection. In a sense, what is happening there is that there is a transfer of a physical asset into the virtual space, in a way. But then, when we talk of exhibition, for example, if we talk of an exhibition from a physical point of view, the work of art is generally hung in a museum or a gallery space. With regards to NFTs, although there are projects that refer to NFT museums already being put up in the USA, when it comes to NFTs, the exhibition space is the screen, is the monitor. So there is this slightly different perspective that we need to take note of. I think it all depends on how much all this technology, all these possibilities are going to be assimilated by practitioners in the field. So far it's still niche, although there are artists who have really made it and they are earning money as well.
In fact, I think it is being considered as another revenue stream for artists. So I think the main perhaps advantage is that, or are there, well, there are other applications as well, but perhaps that is kind of what is attracting artists most, I would say.
Yes, the fact that an artist has a digital asset, has a digital artwork, which is now traceable, that makes it that is a possibility for him to monetize. So that is the gain. It's one of the big gains that was not there before. But we also need to keep in mind that so far we've looked at NFTs as mainly concerning the visual arts.
Yes.
Music, for example, is something that NFTs can really, I mean, the music industry can also benefit from NFTs in very novel ways.
Mm-hmm.
There is also a shift in thinking, because when we talk of NFTs, we can actually consider an NFT as being a ticket to a concert, but also an artwork in its own right. So suddenly, there is a shift in perspectives that is not there in the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think artists have a field day here, because it's up to the creativity of the artist to come up with novel ways how to use essentially this process and to monetize on this process.
That there's an issue as well of checking whether somebody's using my NFT or whatever without my consent, because the problem with digital copies is that it's an exact copy of the original version. But in the future, I envisage that when people place, I don't know, photos online or whatever, it's very hard to trace who's using that photo. But probably in the future there will be systems, I would imagine AI systems, that would be going around the internet and checking that if you are using a photo, you're actually paying the rights to the rightful owner of that photo. Another interesting thing, I think, is that it's opening new revenue streams as well, because traditionally the paintings are restricted to a museum. No, now we have the virtual museum. So, as you said, Sandro, correctly, I could customize it just for my likes. So I'm seeing only the paintings which really interest me or which have particular narrative or theme. But let's not forget as well the museum in the home as well. So, sorry, the future is about having screens all over the place, no? Ultra high definition screens, and maybe I can have a subscription with a museum, and I can sort of rent the NFTs of that museum, so that every day in my house I have new paintings. So the possibilities are quite exciting and endless. Plus, let's not forget that there's a lot of talk as well on the smart NFTs. So the combinations of having AI with NFTs. I mean, even think about what if you have a theater production, no, and as an NFT. Now imagine you could customize that theater production with, for example, different actors. What if the actor become now, the persona of the actor becomes the NFT? And you can use it, sort of superimpose it inside that production, maybe with that actor. So now we're seeing the combinations of different NFTs.
I think this is a fairly new concept. At least it was for me. Initially, as I started this project, I didn't know that it was going to be burned. But I don't mind doing anything, something new. It's okay, I think. My friends thought it was a bit crazy initially, but I don't mind doing things once. Hopefully will be the last one I have to burn, but I'm okay with it, I think. Well, we'll see when we're on location and and looking at the painting. For me, art is my lifestyle. Wherever I am, even if I'm in the car, sometimes I'm constantly on a lookout for different angles, different things to paint, different atmospheres. Wherever I am, like even if I'm traveling away, I revolve my life around it. Not just when I'm searching for a subject, but also in the studio. I dedicate all my free time to painting or sketching or, yeah. I'm Debbie Bonello. I'm a full-time mother of 2 boys, but I love painting, and this is what I do most of my free time. I'm from Mellieħa originally, but I live in Balzan. Mellieħa is very special to me. And this painting revolves around Melliha, so I enjoy doing that. It's a road I grew up in. I walked through it every day when I was a child, going to my grandma's house from school. And I paint most of the time. It's a full-time thing I do now. I started painting or drawing at a very young age. My dad is a sculptor, and I was always surrounded by art. But then I studied to be an art teacher and painted solidly for like the past 5 years. I try to do something small every day just to not lose that freshness or I don't know what to call it. Just to be confident, because it does reflect in some brushwork. If you stop for a while, I find it very hard to restart. So I get my inspiration from various things. It can be people sometimes. It can be a face. It can be my kids. It can be food. It can be anything. It's so varied. And I don't know what mostly captures my inspiration, but I think my body of work shows that I'm interested in many different things, because I like being vast and various in what I do. I can say this is the only painting that features a car. I tend to, when I normally paint landscapes, I avoid including cars completely. It's not something I enjoy doing, and I think I can probably safely say that this would be the only painting that features a car in it. I normally start my projects by going on spot, on location, and taking various angles. In this case, I did not paint it on location because the angle is in the middle of the road, so I couldn't stay there on location. So I took photos, came to the studio, started different sketches just to get a feel of what colors I'm going to be using. As a medium, I generally like to use water-based oils. For my final paintings, it's a medium that I grew to love, a bit like, you can use a bit like watercolor and a bit like oil, so it can be very effective, I think. And then, from the sketches, I move on to the painting. So that's my process usually. I had no idea that these things are happening now and things are changing in the, technological world. And I did have friends giving me a face of shock. Why are you going to burn the painting? But now I understand the whole thing behind blockchain and how it's going to be digitalized. I'm not sure how I'll feel as I'm seeing the painting getting burned, but we'll have to wait and see, I suppose. We'll see. But I'm okay with it. Thank you all for coming, because this makes it even more special.
So it's what Sandra was referring to previously, I believe, in terms of how the artwork works can be experienced. I know, Sandra, that you mentioned the aspect of the digital, this dimension, which is kind of being blurred into one experience and one possible way of how you perceive the experience, but also the value of the artwork. So I don't know if you'd like to perhaps explain this a little bit better.
Absolutely. There is a lot of talk around what we have understood so far as being phygital, which is the combination of the physical and the digital experience. I'm one of those who firmly believes that irrespective of how much technology is going to provide us with tools or with opportunities, we will still be living in the physical at the end of the day. So whatever is going to come up in the next 10, 15, 20 years, there's talk of Internet of the Senses, for example, by 2030 or 2035. Whatever is going to come or to be coming our way still needs to be reconciled with our physical presence, no? So it's so obvious that it's almost it's almost a given, no? So I think the challenge there is to understand how much physical and how much digital are going to be customized according to our personal needs. Because at the end of the day, from a user end perspective, it all depends on how much the user is going to choose to go this way. After COVID, for example, we are witnessing a return to pre-COVID ways of doing things, and museums are at the forefront here. I mean, even during COVID, there were museum directors in the United Kingdom, for example, who were still very keen to get their publics back. So they weren't looking at this phase as an opportunity to experiment or just do that, but also to return to pre-COVID times. So the amount of phygital and digital in an experience could be related to an experience that is an extension of the physical. We can mention, for example, the virtual tour. It's a copy-paste of the physical experience that is online. We can look at the experience as an extension of the physical, which is, for example, a good example of this is the Getty Challenge, whereby the Getty invited audiences all over the world to relate to a painting, to choose a painting, and to imitate that. So an event, an outreach project organized within a museum is suddenly being extended into the homes, into everybody's homes, which is what Alexei has just said. Then there is also the idea of transmedia, where the gallery space or the museum space becomes a multi-platform space where the experience is disseminated across a multiple choice of media and spaces. So this is already happening. For example, ACMI in Melbourne are experimenting with the idea of the multi-platform museum. There are also museums, for example, or spaces that are entirely or almost entirely in the digital. The Museum of Portable Sound, for example, it's essentially a website that you can access. You still pay your ticket, and you have your experience there in the digital, which is still partly physical because you need hardware. You need to access a computer. So these are the possibilities rather than the trends, because sometimes we consider innovation as being trendy, no? But I think that we need to look at the possibilities to really understand what this technology can empower us to create as artists.
And in relation, in fact, to this subject and to research, we have also spoken to Margherita Poulet about a brand new project which explores this hypothetical concept of proposing the digital sphere as a space for artistic expression. And here is what she had to say.
Farfara 2031 is a research project. It's a collaboration between myself, Tony Attard, Marin Richter and Karsten Schwierep, and we are researching or exploring different modes and modalities of programming, cultural programming, In the context of a European Capital of Culture, which Malta will have the title of again in 2031, but using the model of an imaginary or fictional island to look into or to go into virtual, as we understand it, programming. And we understand virtual in this project in all its meanings, not only in digital. So we are looking at digital ways of creating art, digital ways of programming, and digital ways of communicating, but also at virtual ways of being, of community building, of co-researching, co-creating, and exploring these ideas together. Also in the context, in today's context of, I think, some really extreme planetary challenges, which have made partly the whole world go faster towards a digital life, let's say, but also have sort of forced us to look at other ways of travel, other ways of collaborating, and other ways of existing. The project explores these ways of creating and co-creating over the project's duration, which is 15 months. We're going to collaborate with experts in their field, with other artists, with researchers, through a series of research topics, workshops, seminars, and artists in residency programs. So we're starting the project now with each of the four collaborators researching in their own areas of interest related to this topic. And then we will hold an online seminar with a number of invited guests. We'll also, our first workshop, the theme of our first workshop is how to build an island, and also how to unbuild an island, because we're looking at ideas of virtuality and speculative programming, let's say. We are working with artist collective Time's Up for this first workshop, and we'll be exploring what makes an island in its physical and virtual form, to take that forward then to see how we can program for a physical, non-physical, fictional, non-fictional, speculative capital of culture. Then later in the year, we will issue a call for 3 residencies. They may not be artists in the traditional sense, but they could be residencies carried out by researchers or writers or artists to explore the topic as we go along and as we carry out our research as well. And then we'll come back around to another seminar at the end. The sort of output of the project in a way is to work towards a speculative bid book, as we understand it, for a speculative capital of culture, but through this digital and virtual format. The project is interesting for us as 4 collaborators because we are not digital natives, and in a way that's why we wanted to explore this aspect. So we are looking at the topic as, let's say, non-experts. So we have asked some collaborators to come on board, for example, Adnan Hadzi of the University of Malta, or Time's Up, as I mentioned, the Artist Collective, to guide us. There's also on board Rita Orlando, who is an architect by profession, but she worked with Matera, the European Capital of Culture there, on their digital program. And also Gerald Richter of Technopolitics, Vienna-based collective. So they are working with us to advise us on the, let's say, the actual or technological parts of the project. As I think we all saw during COVID-19 and its various lockdowns, a lot of artists of many disciplines reacted by taking their work or their performances to a home audience, sometimes with more success than others, or sometimes trying to maybe translate that which is made for a physical audience into something online. And we wanted to see how we could take this idea but develop it to a more, I don't know, somehow a more community building approach. So whether that is hybrid technologies, so maybe, for example, using AR rather than VR, or AR, but with people in one place rather than at home, or it could be things that we don't even know about yet. That's why we have our advisors on board as well, to see how we can sort of program and how artists can create, but without losing the part of co-creation, I guess. There are, I don't know, there are groups of people who are very, very comfortable online. There are groups of people who are not comfortable at all. But we wanted to see how we can find this balance maybe, and see how we can use technology to create work, or how artists also, we are researching how other artists are creating work, and how to program for this, for today's, I guess, realities.
So, from a technology standpoint, there are the opportunities, as we mentioned, but there are also possible threats, particularly in terms of accessibility, in terms also of the sustainability of these NFTs as a concept, but also in terms of the blockchain technology, etc. So, what are these possible threats around this subject?
Okay, so with regards to accessibility, I think it's a big issue. First of all, not everyone has a computer accessible, and this we've seen it quite a lot during the pandemic, when a lot of organizations, schools became online. People had to adapt in some way or another, and we've seen families that did not have a computer available, families who had a computer available but it wasn't powerful enough, families who maybe had a computer available but not for everyone. So I know a particular case where you had the eldest son was studying on his laptop, the second child was on the tablet, and the little one was on the mobile phone. All three of them were having a lesson simultaneously. So these are real challenges which people have to face. Then of course there's the learning curve. Before COVID, nobody talked about Zoom, or at least it meant something totally different. But people had to learn the software, includes the teachers, the workers. So there's a huge digital divide, and I think that's the biggest problem. We need to help people to get through now to the digital divide. Now, luckily, as I said, technology is catching up as well. So we expect more natural interfaces. So interfaces, for example, where you speak with a computer rather than using the mouse or the pointing device, especially for the eldest generation, which are quite...
There is an element of lack of trust possibly here as well.
Yes.
I mean,
don't forget, this is new technology, so people tend to see it a little bit warily, sort of. Is it real? I mean, let's not forget, for example, what happened when social media came about. No, I mean, people just found social media and they had to use it. But was it the correct way of using? Some people just posted everything online. Others posted nothing online. So what's the correct way of using it? And I think we will go through this similar learning curve. Now, the biggest problem which I see at the moment as well with NFTs and with the blockchain ecosystem in general is the issue with power. It's very power hungry, especially because Sandro mentioned the minting. The minting takes a lot of processing power because it's based on a system called which uses what is known as work. So essentially, in layman terms, is just giving them a mathematical algorithm and they try to break that algorithm. That's all. But to find the answer, you need to do a lot of iterations, which consume a lot of work.
Exactly. And there's more to that because there is a carbon footprint which is quite high.
Exactly.
I mean, there are platforms who are very sensitive to this issue and they are trying to minimize this impact. Although the idea of minimizing impact is not the only solution here, I think coming up with measures of redress to address the carbon footprint of these servers and what this minting process really costs in terms of money, in terms of energy as well.
In fact, just to give an idea, the mining of bitcoins globally uses as much power as the entire country of Argentina. So you can imagine how much processing is being used to mine these bitcoins in this case. So that's problematic. Of course, there
in terms of sustainability, there is a bit of an issue there.
Of course, there are solutions. So now they're talking about the proof of stake, where like you have different people voting. It's all an automated system. The downside of that is a little bit less democratic than the other, because if I have a lot of coins, then I have more votes than the other. But I mean, these are solutions. Let's not forget that these technologies are still embryonic. So, you know, they've been only with us a few years. So it needs time until we find the right solution for it.
And also in relation to the value of the artworks that are being traded, is it the right terminology? Is it being challenged possibly here on these platforms?
Well, I think that what is interesting at this point in time is considering the fact that the function and purpose of the art gallery is being challenged here. So the markup and the work that an art gallery would generally be doing with regards to the traditional artwork is becoming relatively obsolete here, although there are art galleries that are shifting and moving into this space, because at the end of the day, there is always a question of utility. I mean, all the technology that we need is there already. And most of the technology that we are using was invented for military purposes. And it's been there for quite some time. What is happening is that, for example, in the USA, most of this technology is not regulated by a patent that cannot be accessible to the general public. So the very Steve Jobs would come along and they would use open access stuff and develop all these products that we are using in our day, in our life. So there is this issue with regards to the middleman here and what the art galleries, what the function and purpose of the art gallery is going to look like in the years to come. There is also a question which Alexei also mentioned with regards to hardware and to knowledge, how to use this, because this is still niche. I mean, the art ecosystem, which is so excited about NFTs, is relatively small. It's growing because artists are understanding the potential of this, which is essentially money, earning a living also through assets that were not saleable at this level. So the more people understand this, the more the art market out there understand the full potential of this. And I think Sotheby's and Christie's have set some interesting trends when they actually were auctioning NFTs. The risk at this point in time is that the quality might not be clearly understood, because at the end of the day, this is a process. Yeah. So it all depends on the artist or on the creative who is using it. The analogy would be comparing the situation at this point in time to what was happening way back in the 90s, where some people, investors, were purchasing websites at 10,000, 20,000 euros, but paying a hefty price. No one pays that money for a website now. It's because we have understood that this has a context, and we have understood it better up to this time. So there is this risk here that an investment in NFTs could not be as worthwhile as one would expect it to be.
If I can be a little bit bold here, I would say that, you know, in the future probably we'll see the end of art galleries, because if you see what happened in other fields, a lot of the middlemen have been cut with technology. So I don't know if the art world will follow the trend. Probably we're heading in that direction. But I think at the moment...
Sandro might not be 100% in agreement.
I have a different perspective. I have a different perspective.
I'm saying in the future, not tomorrow. No, but what I wanted to add is that I think today they have a very important function on quality, though, because we're seeing a lot of speculation when it comes to NFTs. And just to give some examples, I mean, the famous red pixel, no? This is one single pixel, it's red, it's a dot, essentially, and they sold it for $800,000. And another famous case is the first tweet on Twitter. I mean, this was sold for $2.9 million. Now they went to resell it for $48 million, and the highest offer he got was $290. So you know, there's a lot of speculation going on at the moment.
Those are the risks. I think the analogy here, a good analogy would be what happened when Kindle was invented. At that point in time, many thought that the book will become practically will not be there anymore. 15, 20 years up to now, obviously, Kindle is still there, the book is still there. It's because Kindle created a market that was not there when the book was the only option. So I think that going by this analogy, art galleries will probably go through this shift. They would adapt, they would regroup.
They would have to reinvent themselves.
They would have to reinvent themselves. And this is something that happens all the time in the business world.
True.
It's less and slower, much slower when it comes to, for example, museums, because they are conservative by nature. They conserve objects. So in a way, this idea of conservation is very much entrenched within their thinking. But there's one other challenge there, because most museums around the most museums have made their collections open access. So you can actually download any image from these museums that have embraced this approach, and you can use it for any purpose, which means that any creative out there can download images, high quality images, more often than not, and use it for any purpose, including minting it as an NFT. So this is going to shift even the way we regulate things. In Italy, for example, this week, they have just announced new regulations to cover the NFT sector. I mean, Uffizi had already been minting way back in August last year. They stopped everybody and they said, okay, let's regulate this sector because it might get out of hand. So
I'm really sorry I have to conclude this conversation. There's certainly a lot more to say. It's just the beginning of a possibly long process. I would like to thank you, Sandro, thank you, Alexei, for being here and for participating. We hope that this session was interesting, was engaging. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.